Mhm.
Azure VMware Solution is running Azure or VMware natively on Azure. So you've got your environment, your on-prem environment. You got all your workloads, your application, everything running in vSphere, vCenter, and all that V stuff. Now, you can create in Azure for multiple reasons. Maybe you have to shrink your data center footprint. Maybe you have a capacity issue that you've basically reached capacity of your own data center. You need to expand somewhere else. There's a number of different reasons why you would want to do that. But you can create an Azure private cloud where we'll deploy nodes, VMware nodes on bare metal in an environment that is restricted to you, where you can connect it to your environment and actually gain or expand your data center footprint into the cloud. And once you've done that, you can now start using Azure native services to support your workload. If you want to know more, there's another wonderful AKA link here, aka.ms/learnlive-2022-0301B, because that's the one we recorded another time, where you can drill into a bit more of the details of the introduction. But now let's move on to what you do to actually plan for it.
Mhm.
So planning for VMware Solution, isn't it like, don't you just go out and deploy it, Amy?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Just give me AVS right now.
The AVS right
No.
now, but we can't do that now. Mostly because there are some requirements that you need to take care of.
Mhm.
We need to evaluate the required components. So your resources, your subscription, your resource groups, the region where you deploy this, because that's not deployed in every region just yet. Right now, it's Canada Central, US East, North Central US, West US, Australia East, West Europe, Japan East, and UK South. So these are the regions where we actually have the service available. You have to figure out what your resource name is going to be. You have to check your subscription eligibility. And you have to open a support ticket. And the support ticket is really because the node for your VM are a certain size that typically is restricted for most customers. Pardon me?
They're massive. So yeah, you're asking for a lot of compute and storage.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
So, and the process for that support ticket is also based on your subscription eligibility criteria, because if you have an enterprise agreement or a Microsoft customer agreement, or your subscription is under CSP or Cloud Solution Provider care, the process to create that support ticket might be a little different. But in any case, you have to open the support ticket and request a quota increase. And that could take a couple of days. So that needs to be done as soon as possible while you're reviewing your environment. Then, if you want to right size that environment, you have to look at the environment that you have in your environment and register the provider for it, and then assess your own environment to see what size you need in Azure. And you can use Azure Migrate for this, and there's a link, aka.ms/avs-assess. That'll take you through the steps. But the gist of it is that in your environment, you are going to create an assessment that's going to connect to an appliance running in your VMware that you have to deploy. Watch the aforementioned link. It'll tell you everything you need to know about getting that ready. And then your assessment, you have to decide how you're going to assess your environment. And there's two types of assessments that we are concerned with at this point, because you see there's a lot of grayed out spaces in here. But one of the things that's not grayed out is your node size and your sizing criteria. Number one is performance-based, where it'll evaluate the VMs that are running in your VMware environment. And then based on the CPU usage, memory usage, and compute power that it requires, is going to suggest the proper size in Azure. Or you could do it as on-premise. So you drop the little drop down will say as on-premises, which means If you've got a 32 core, 64 terabyte of RAM machine, it's going to size a 32 core, 64 terabyte machine in Azure, which may not be the best use of resources, but the control is in your hands. You decide how you size or you assess your environment. Ooh. Once that's created, you create a group, because you can assess multiple groups of VMs running in your environment. So if you've got a workload that is a multiple VMs that work together, you can assess them as a group. Once you've created the group and you run the assessment, it's going to come back after a little while, because it does need time to collect the data and analyze it, with a kind of a dashboard that tells you your readiness to move to an AVS solution. So how many machines are ready to move to AVS immediately? How many are ready to move with some conditions? Maybe they're missing a patch or they're missing a configuration, but it'll actually let you know everything that you need to know in terms of what you need to migrate. And all of that can be drilled down to the individual machine and the state of each of them, whether or not they are ready to go. Once you've got that information, now you have to look at the Azure VMware Solution components that we actually run on those bare metal nodes.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we run in Azure is VCSA, vSphere, vCenter, ESXi, vSAN, Alphabet Soup, version 6.7, update 3 only. That's right.
Yeah, you're locked in.
You're kind of locked into that version right now. And NSX-T, so if you're running it on-prem, it's NSX. If you're running it in Azure, the flavor of it is NSX-T, is version 3.12. Speaking of NSX.
Yes.
There are two ways of configuring NSX in Azure. Number one is you can use the Azure Resource Manager portal and configure your network segments, DHCP server, and so on in the portal. Or if you're more familiar with the vSphere tooling, you can use that to cover it. And let me show you actually how that works.
Yeah, show us, Pierre.
So if you're in the Azure portal and you can go to your environment and you can click on segments, it'll show you the segments that you've got currently configured in your environment. And you can click on the add button, give it a name, and follow your naming convention. That's always ARD. And you give it the gateway as to where you want the next hop to go to. So in this case, I'm going to give it the address 10.5.4.1/24. And I click OK. Once I click OK, it goes away and starts creating that segment. All right, so once it's completed, it'll show up in your list, and I can click on it and drill down to it, or I can go to my vSphere tooling and show that the segments that I have now created is available for me. Amy, do you want to take us through how to set it up using the NSX tooling?
Sure. Yeah, another way is through NSX. So you go into your AVS environment. I will need my identity to find out the URL for NSXT. So I'm going to copy that to my clipboard, go over to my jump box, because that's how you connect securely. And I'm going to paste in here and go. So here's our NSXT login. I'm going to copy and paste the login credentials. And do know you cannot create your own password. We generate it for you. So you copy to clipboard, or you can always generate a new one if you do get compromised. So I'm going to copy the password and then paste. It's always fun on a Mac. Log in. And now we're in NSX. And you can see the 4 segments because Pierre created that additional one. So I click on it, I see his FE04. So I'm going to create one, click add segment. I'm going to name it FE05 and then pick the gateway, the T1, and transport zone will be the overlay of the T1. And then subnet, again, not overlapping. got to give it a gateway. So 10.5.5.1/24. And that is it. We're not doing DHCP at this point. I'm just going to click save and click no. I don't want to do anything else. And it's already there. So now we have FE05. If I go to vCenter here, it's going to show up FE05. So now I have that address space to use for VMs.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So if you're more familiar with vSphere and the VMware tooling, use that. If you're more familiar, or if you want to learn the Azure portal, or using PowerShell or Azure CLI, you can do it any way that to your heart's content, which is really cool, because now you can start learning new ways of doing things, automating things, and so on. Very cool. The last thing that we have in the planning, or looking at things that you need to figure out, is your configuration backup. In our environment, the backup and restoration of your state or your private cloud, your vCenter NSX-T configuration, they're automatically backed up by the service, and not on an hourly basis. So you don't have to worry about like saving your configuration to a separate file or backing it up somewhere else. We will do that for you on an hourly basis. So if you need to restore to the last known good environment, you can restore to the last snapshot that we took for you as part of the service. Whew, that was quick. Now let's check to see whether or not we learned anything, or whether or not we retained it.
Did we teach it?
Did we teach you properly? So what version of vCenter is deployed with AVS?
Well, we are locked in. So it's the 6.7 update 3.
Let's check to see. And yes, it is. You are correct. Next question. What is the minimum number of nodes required for the AVM solution?
Well, like we spoke before, for a good HA or vSAN cluster, you need 3. So 3 would be the obvious choice for good standards.
And you are also correct. And now that we've reviewed the resources that we need and how we can configure them, we actually now need to plan that actual network topology for use with VMware, and that is your section, Amy. So take it away.
Okay, it's all me. Okay. So yeah, planning your network topology for AVS is really important, just like preparing your environment. So because you're going to need IP address spaces for your management, for provisioning, for vMotion, just like on premises. You don't want anything overlapping. So we have an example breakdown here. The whole thing is a /22 environment. So it's a big CIDR. And then you carve it out into these smaller subnets. So like for your private cloud, for HCX, which is to migrate from on-premises to the cloud and back and forth. Express route peering. So I won't go through the whole list, but you definitely have to keep all these management networks in mind when you're carving out your whole AVS environment.
So none of that actually applies to the actual VMs right now. This is to support the service itself, correct?
Right. Yeah, this is just vMotion. It's all management subnets, your vSAN, your HCX. So none of this is for actual VMs yet.
Okay.
So and then here's a good slide just showing how to peer your gateway. So when you deploy AVS, you get an express route. And if you put in a virtual network, it sets up an express route for you. And there are 2 types of interconnectivity for AVS. The basic is where you have AVS and you have your express route connection, but maybe on-prem you don't. And so you just connect with basic connectivity. So it would be more for, I wouldn't do production, especially if you're planning to migrate from your on-prem to the cloud. I wouldn't use basic, but that's all you need to get up and running, to get into the environment securely. And then so full interconnectivity is when both sides have an express route circuit. So we have our express route, and then the customer has their express route. We connect them, and then you can have full connectivity back and forth.
Okay.
So, okay, so there are prereqs for the express route global reach, and global reach is something you need to enable on your express route to be able to configure connectivity on-prem to your AVS solution. So you need established connectivity, obviously, and then you need to order an express route circuit, and that can take some time. So that connects directly into our edge gateway in the data center. And then you need that /29 of a non-overlapping network address so everything can route correctly. And this is very important. So the express route provider service, it must be 4-byte ASN, and that's an autonomous system number. It's for kind of like, it's for routing between the routes, because without that global reach, you wouldn't be able to route between the circuits. So it's kind of like using BGP, but just another way to provide network routes.
I guess it's for the all the gateways to learn what the routes are going to be, so that if you change something, that change will actually propagate, and every gateway will know how to route traffic to your environment.
Right, exactly. So here's just a good image of connectivity with global reach. You have the customer data center, the edge router using express route right into Microsoft's edge router. So you're connected right into Microsoft, and you could use that backbone into Azure and into the services, into your AVS network. So it's pretty fast and secure. And then also there's required ports if you want to use DNS, which I think you would want to. If you want vCenter to connect in, it uses TCP 8000. So different ports you want to keep in mind for your any firewalls to connect into.
Yeah, and you want to keep your security team locally involved in these projects, because they're the ones who are going to have to poke all these holes or allow that traffic between Azure and your environment to come through over these ports.
Exactly. So we're going to deploy Azure VMware Solution.
Oh, so you mean up to now we didn't deploy anything? We just kind of
we're still planning. You got to plan the work.
We're still planning.
Work the plan. That's what an old boss used to say. So yeah, so a lot of planning so you don't screw it up.
That's right.
And are you showing, or am I showing the deployment?
You are.
Okay, I'm happy to. So after we've done all that planning, we're ready to deploy. Yay! So we registered the resource provider, and there's multiple ways, like Pierre had mentioned. There's Azure CLI, PowerShell. You can even do it in the portal. So I can demo going through the portal and using Cloud Shell. So here I'm just opening up Cloud Shell terminal. I'm going to use PowerShell because we have it on the Learn doc that you can just copy and paste. So I'm going to just copy, paste the Microsoft AVS registrar provider. And so I'm going to double check. So you click on your subscription. This is where you can add it through the portal as well. So scroll down into resource providers so you can see if it's been registered, or this is where you can actually add it as well. So you can see it's currently registering since I just ran that command.
Yeah, and the registering part typically will take a little bit of time, where you issue the command and then you have to basically let it do its thing for a little bit longer, go grab a coffee, come back, and by the time you're done, it will be registered, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So here's just an example of using CLI, if that's your flavor. That's the command. PowerShell, that's what I used. It was the register AZ provider command. And then, or through the portal, you go right into your subscription, click register, and you select AVS. So
yeah, and then one of the reasons that we actually register different providers for this is not a standard for service that everybody gets by default within their subscription. So you actually have to enable the provider or activate the provider in your environment so that it knows how to interpret the commands to deploy it, manage it, start it, stop it, and all that good stuff.
Correct. Like you could have put it in your ticket for the nodes, but if you don't register that provider, you're going to go through these steps and it's going to fail, and you're going to be sad because it takes a while to deploy this. So, and it's longer than a cup of coffee. So it's more like a car ride, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to demo deploying it. Okay, so we're getting ready to deploy it now. We have a subscription. We have our resource group. We have a resource name for the AVS solution, not exceeding 14 characters.
That's right.
There's only one size of host, so you can't really go wrong. It's the AV36. The number of hosts, at least 3. And then your private address block that you want to be a /22. So, knowledge check.
Knowledge check.
Drum roll. So, I failed at teaching you this, but at a minimum, which role is required at the subscription level to deploy Azure VMware Solution? Well, I'll give you the answer because I didn't say you have to be a contributor.
Let me guess. Let me guess.
Oh,
okay. In a environment, because you're going to be managing more than just a virtual machine, because these are machines that are built on bare metal. So the VMware or the VM contributor role would not apply. In a corporate environment, not everybody would be the owner. Therefore, I wouldn't assume that that would be the minimum requirement in terms of role for you to have. And by process of elimination, I would say that you need to be a contributor. Did I get it right?
Good job. Yes. Because VM contributor, you can only play with VMs.
That's right.
Owner, that's like everyone's a domain admin, which, you know, can happen. Or contributor. Bam. So X gets the square for Pierre. Oh, that rhymes too. That's great. Which planning step is required to deploy Azure VMware Solution in the Azure portal? What do you think, Pierre? Is it create a resource lock?
No. Well, how would you lock something you haven't created yet?
Well, I mean, you could make it so you can't deploy, I guess.
True. True. Creating a service principal. I think it's a little premature to create a service principal, and it doesn't say what the service principal would actually do. So I'd say that your first thing would be to register the service provider. Yes,
so important. So it knows what it's doing when you're deploying it. It can talk. Good job, Pierre.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we've deployed AVS, and now we want to connect to on-premises. So first, you want to create an Azure Bastion resource. And that's our way to securely connect.
All right. Yep. So I was gonna ask why create a jump box and a Bastion server, because I think of the jump box, we mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. So you create the jump box, you get rid of any public IPs on it. You don't open up RDP to the public. It is secure, and Bastion allows you to connect to that jump box, which then communicates to your VMware environment, your AVS environment.
So the Bastion server is there to secure your access to the jump box.
Exactly.
Got it.
So you don't have to do that, you know, quick. I forget what it is, where you can quickly open RDP in and shut it down. This makes it even more secure.
Perfect.
So we actually have I can demo creating a Bastion resource. So you go into your Azure portal. I'm going to create a resource and go into the marketplace. Type in Bastion. It should come up here and select it and click create. Make sure you're in your subscription, the same resource group that we deployed AVS in. Got to give it your naming convention name there. So I'll give it a unique name. BST. And I'm selecting basic. This is new. Basic it's not redundant. You can have like 2 instances, 3 instances of Bastion now. But for this, we just need the basics. And then you need a gateway for it to connect. So I'm going to create an Azure Bastion gateway. I mean, subnet.
And this particular one, I know from experience, the name of the subnet is actually very, very, very important. It
Yes.
has to be exactly that as it's written there, or else
Yes.
the system will not find it properly.
Yes, just like gateway subnet. That's for your express route. You need that for AVS. So now I have my Bastion subnet. I have my public IP. I'll just accept that and review and create. It's going to validate that I make sense. I hope I do. All right, let's create. So there we go. We'll go to resource. It's your lovely Bastion host. And that's it.
Okay. And for those of you who may have noticed that the video kind of jumped a little bit, some of these demos have been pre-recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we pre-record them is not because we want to have this smoke and mirror type of experience for you, is that some of those demos will take a significant amount of time, and this session is not that long. So we've pre-recorded them and kind of cut out the parts where we wait while those are happening.
Yeah, the Bastion takes a little bit because it's got
Bastion
the
takes
NICs
a little bit. AVS takes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They all take a little bit of time. All right, so we've created our Bastion host to access our environment.
Yes, and now as I walked through, you pick your subscription where AVS is deployed, same resource group, using your naming standard, the virtual network that AVS is using, obviously, so you can communicate, and then using that dedicated subnet named Azure Bastion, that subnet that we created. That's important. And then the public IP that allows Bastion to be connected to. And then you pick the appropriate SKU. So, and then Azure, you create a jump host. I had already created one, just a basic Windows server. So that's what you use to connect to vCenter, and use Bastion to connect to that host. So again, I can show using Bastion to connect to the jump host, connecting to vCenter. So here I'm going to go to my jump box. I cannot connect to it at all unless I select Bastion. So connect, Bastion. And then this is my username I created, local admin, and then the password I created when I deployed the VM.
Which is different than the vSphere environment where the passwords are generated for you.
Right.
In this case, you get to pick for your Bastion host the credentials that you want.
Right. So now I'm into Windows. Now I can get into my AVS environment, all the vCenter stuff. So here it's lovely, telling me nothing's configured. But if I open up a browser, Edge, of course.
Edge, of course, however, any standard browser will work. So install the one that you prefer.
Right. Just not Safari. I've noticed, Safari doesn't like it. A lot of things don't like Safari on my Mac. So now I'm going to check out my credentials that are stored here. So if we go to the environment, the AVS cloud here, if I go to identity, there it is. Okay. That's where the URL for vCenter is. So I'm going to copy to clipboard. Of course, the username and password as well, just like when we logged into NSXT. Having problems here. Okay.
And while you're loading that information and logging in, I want to make sure that the audience understands that, and there may be some questions in the chat about this one as well, is once your environment is connected using ExpressRoute to the AVS environment running in Azure, you don't necessarily need to get into the jump box, because you can get in using the tools internally and basically piggyback over the ExpressRoute to connect to that environment. In our particular case, for our demos, we are connecting to the VMware from the outside. So your experience when you're actually running it connected with an ExpressRoute connection may be a little different.
So here we get the password that I don't know what it is, and I have to paste it and log into my AVS environment. Yay!
Isn't that the most secure password? One that you don't remember what it is?
Yeah, I don't know. And then, yeah, we got our cluster. It's all deployed. It's the names it decided to give it. And there we go.
Okay, so this is how you connect to your jump box through the Bastion host that we just created.
Yes.
Perfect.
The secure way. So, okay. So after that, yeah, as you were talking about connectivity. So global reach allows your express route to route between your on-prem and the AVS solution. So to enable it is pretty simple. You go into the portal, you select express route, and you request an authorization key. So this is the key you're going to put in on your on-premises express route. So you request an authorization key and you give it a name. And then you copy it from here. So there's like a copy to clipboard, and then that allows you to peer. So then they can talk through the circuits. So we go to global reach, and then you add the key from the other side. So, sorry, I only have screenshots for this, but then you add. So, and then there's also Azure CLI, probably some PowerShell. No, CLI. Yeah. So, yeah, you can automate this command line or go through the portal.
And it's important to note that express route, you do have to talk and deal with a local provider, because somebody has to provide that last mile of wire connected into your own data center, because express route is basically a secure connection from within your data center to all the way to within our environment.
Call that cable guy.
Yeah, and it'll be there between 2 and 4 next Tuesday.
2 and 4 months. Yeah. I kid mostly.
Yes.
So now we got a knowledge check. Are you excited?
Yes. Let's see if I learned anything.
All right. Let's see. So which resource is required to configure express route peering on the Azure VMware Solution Private Cloud to the on-premises environment?
Well, a customer-provided express route circuit is what we were just talking about.
Yes.
The application gateway, we haven't gotten there yet, but that would be to expose one of your application to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And a network virtual appliance. I'm not quite sure that has anything to do at this point with express route. So I'm going to pick A.
All right. I think you're onto something. So let's see. A, yes. In order to peer, you need an express route to an express route.
That's right.
So for on-premises network traffic to reach Azure VMware Solution, which component is required? So you got your basic VPN, you got express route global reach, or you got a load balancer, which I don't know why you want to load balance into your environment. It's not a requirement.
Load balancer is for AHA. So if you got multiple environment, I guess it could theoretically be used. But I think in the spirit of that question, I would have to say express route global reach.
I think you are correct. Good job.
Yeah, and if you don't have a express route, maybe because it's not available in your country, because you're doing this temporarily and you don't want to roll out an actual express route, virtual VPN connection, so site-to-site VPN connection to your AVS environment is something that you can use. However, it's not as robust and typically less reliable than express route.
Yeah, it's that basic connectivity. So maybe you want to stand things up while you're waiting for your express route. You can do that as well.
Yep. Thanks, Amy. You are correct. Like the next section is configuring your NSX-T. And as remember, on-prem is NSX. In Azure, it's NSX-T, which is basically your software-defined data center components for the networking within your AVS environment. So, and as we mentioned, as we showed you in the first section of this session, to deploy or to configure your NSX-T networking or your segments, you can do it in multiple ways. You can do it in the portal. You can do it in your vSphere tooling, or you can use Azure CLI or PowerShell. There are two types of gateway that are created or that are needed in our AVS solution. The number one, the first one is the NSX-T, the tier 0 gateway. And that one, you have no control over it. So when you deploy, so if you go to the marketplace and you say AVS, I want to deploy an AVS, and you click on all of the nice things, and you actually deploy your AVS solution, the tier 0 gets deployed for you because it's the gateway that is used by the underlying infrastructure, the part that Microsoft manages for you. The tier 1 gateways is the one that you have control over, is really what it boils down to. And when you set it up, you're setting it up under workload networking in the portal or in your NSX tooling. And really, the 4 things that are really important to set up are the segment. So you create a segment, give it a proper name, a DHCP server or DHCP range on a server, port mirroring, and DNS. And in our case, all of that can be set up in multiple places, as everything else that we've covered today. Number one is you can cover it in the portal, and it's all in one environment. So if you could go to your AVS environment in Azure and you drill down to the portal and you go under segments, then you have your segments, your DHCP, your port mirroring, and your DNS all in one location that you can create or configure, manage, change, edit, add to the whole bits, as we showed you in the first section, where we just went into the segment, clicked the add button, gave it a range, a gateway address, and then let the network or the Azure Resource Manager deploy it for us. Mm-hmm. So this is all of that environment, that's those segments and everything. To test that, really what you would do is, once you've got your segments, DHCP, port mirroring, and DNS, because of course DNS is very important, because if something goes wrong, it's always DNS's fault. Just joking, but DNS is very important. It's the first thing that normally people will blame when connectivity doesn't work. But once that's all done, you can deploy a VM in your environment and then test it by browsing a site on the internet, pinging an IP address out in the wild, or pinging a service internally, because through your express route or your site-to-site VPN, to see if you can connect to the SQL server that's on-prem, to the other machines that are running, or other resources that your machine may need that are on-prem. And all of that can be tested through a VM. And that's about it. So setting up NSX-T, to summarize, through the portal, through the VMware tooling, but it's basically exactly the same, where you set up your segments, which are your subnets and everything else, your DHCP, your networking, your port mirroring, and your DNS name resolution. And I think we're at the end of this session. There's only one thing left to do, Amy.
Oh no, what is that? What could it be?
The knowledge check. One more time.
We got this. We got this.
All right. So when you try to deploy Azure VMware Solution, you receive an error stating that no registered provider found. Ooh. What should you try next? Or what should you have done up front?
We'll try to redeploy and see if it happens again. That would be fun.
Is that the definition of insanity? Trying the same thing and expecting different results?
Yes.
Okay.
Register the AVS resource provider. I mean, that sounds pretty important. I think we covered that.
That kind of rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, because if you try to deploy in a different region, again, if you don't register the resource provider, it's not going to work.
So I think we've got to be
B.
So yes, it is B. Next one, if you can't connect to your AVS environment from your on-premises environment, what configuration step should you take?
I delete everything. Yes. No.
Yeah, if I can't connect to it, I don't need it. No, it's okay. All right.
Delete and start over. It takes 3 to 4 hours to deploy. So,
yeah.
Ensure
Ensure all the gateways, including the Azure Express Route provider, are supporting the 4-byte ASN.
Yeah, well, that's how it talks. That's how it routes.
I think you mentioned something like that and BGP for the routing. Yeah, that sounds,
Express Route uses ASN because otherwise the circuits can't talk to each other. So it needs that 4-byte.
Well, they don't know where they are.
Yeah.
So okay.
So
I would say B.
Yeah.
Is that B? Yes, it is.
Yes. Yes.
X gets the square. I really like that one. I'm going to steal that. Next one. When you try to deploy Azure VMware Solution, you receive an error message indicating that there are steps to take before node deployments. How would you resolve the error so you can continue? So if you can't deploy a node and those nodes are unique to AVS environment, what could it be?
Well, we said in that planning section, what do you have to plan, and you got to have a subscription. You got to open a support ticket to get host quota because they're pretty big.
That must be it. That must be it. The quota allocation. And yes, you are correct. X gets the square.
We're showing our age.
Yes, we are. At a minimum, which CIDR network address block does an Azure VMware Solution private cloud require? Not has, but require. So it's a requirement. It's a hard requirement.
I mean, we've only said, the CIDR should be /22. So you can carve it up into all those little management networks and have enough to play with for your VM environment.
But the top level block has to be a /22, and you are correct again. And what type of interconnectivity provides network into Azure resource and services?
Well, this is kind of tricky because full gives connectivity, but half, I didn't even hear of that. So half doesn't sound good. And then basic. So it's probably like, what's the minimum you need to connect?
So I think if I remember correctly, what you said during the session is that basic provides you just one way into the Azure resource and services, but the full is bi-directional, so you can do migration back and forth.
Yeah, single, you have one virtual network, and you're just using your VPN in or...
Okay, so let's see if we are correct here. And basic again. And I believe the next and final slide for checking our questions is what is one of the gateways deployed with AVS?
This one's so obvious. I mean, because you can't say it. Remember, you're like NSXT. No.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even talk about application gateway or virtual network gateway. We just talked about NSX tier 0 and tier 1, so I would assume that's the answer we're looking for, and it is.
Yeah.
So you got all of them right.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool.
Expect something from the boss, I think.
Yes. Hopefully, maybe he's in the chat room. Maybe we can ask him.
Yeah. Hey.
All right. Thank you very much, Amy, for all of this help today in walking through our Learn module. And for you at home or watching, if you want to walk through it, there's a lot more detail that are available in the Learn module itself. So aka.ms/learn live-2022-0301C. And you can basically walk through the whole thing and just not listen to us. But like I mentioned, there's a lot more details in there that I highly recommend that you go through on your own.
XP.
Yes, and not only that, you get to show off to your friends and coworkers that you're better than them.
Pierre would never do to me.
Absolutely not. That's not my style. And of course, don't miss the next sessions that we have, such as migrate VMware workloads on premises to Azure, where we actually do a migration.